Welcome to Life with Beth and Court,
where we teach you how to live authentically and build your best life.
one step at a time. Welcome back to another episode of Life with Beth and Court. I'm Beth.
I'm Court.
And today we're talking about making difficult decisions.
Oh, you added in the making. I thought it was really direct, like just difficult decisions.
Oh, well,
it
could be.
Dateline.
This episode, we are talking about difficult decisions.
Good job.
And how we go about making difficult decisions when in the moment, obviously, based on the name, it is difficult.
When Beth Ann and I make decisions, we have very different criteria for decision making and very different processes.
We sure do.
And she's smirking ear to ear right now, and I will elaborate. So I tend to make decisions based off my intuition. And
what she calls God gut.
I do have God gut.
Neurotypical humans call it intuition.
Yeah, you can call it whatever.
Court calls it God gut.
Yeah, you can name, if you have intuition, you can name it whatever you want to name it. I call it God gut. You can call it whatever you want, whatever feels right. But Beth Ann, how many times is my intuition spot on? Like, give a percentage.
Spot on in a decision or spot on in
we're just bragging about my intuition.
Oh, if we're just bragging about God gut, then yeah. I mean, it's like a good 90%.
Yeah. I make decisions quickly based off my intuition, and Beth Ann likes to go slow and have a checklist and a process.
You're making this out to be a very terrible me in this situation.
No, that's just how it works in my brain because I'm like, go, go, go. And I will say there's a time and a place for that. And there's also a time and place where that's gotten me into trouble. I would say the most difficult decision I made in my life within the past year, almost to the date, was to quit my job. And I had been with the organization for 7 years. I had built a lot of relationships. Those people had become my family. It was the hardest decision I have ever had to make. And it was good in the long run, but it was really tough immediately after. Ultimately, I knew it was what was best for me. It was what was best for my health and my happiness. But at the same time, immediately after, I remember, and I think this happens with a lot of decisions, especially when they're big ones, I remember panicking. Like, oh my God, did I just make a mistake? Like, what am I doing? What am I thinking? And so it was one of those situations where ultimately it was a good decision. But I think that's something people can probably relate to is when you have a big decision to make, you might panic after.
Yeah, well,
what did I do?
Of course, when it's something like quitting a job, you're basically launching yourself into the unknown.
Right.
And that, for you, I remember that transition, and there weren't a whole lot of answers on the other side of your decision. And that makes a difficult decision 10 times more difficult when you say, I know that this is what needs to happen, but I don't know what needs to happen next. That decision that you had to make was a difficult decision, but it sounded like it was the decision that you knew that you had to make in your best interest. So what were the criteria that you kind of used to make that decision when in the moment it definitely feels difficult and you can't see the other side? The other side is unknown. So what did you use as criteria when you were evaluating that decision?
Ultimately, when I made the decision, I looked at where I was. If I was living in a healthy mindset and a healthy lifestyle, if I was living into my values, if I was being true to myself. And I think one of the biggest indicators was who I was by the end. And it was certainly not who I am as a person. It was a version of me that I did not recognize, that I did not like. I had no energy to give to others. So the overall arching factor was I had become someone that I did not recognize, and that wasn't true to who I was.
Which is, I mean, that's not easy to evaluate at the time, because when your heart very much so was still tied to the work that you did, it's just that was not a good place for you individually to be.
Well, and I think part of it is it's really scary to make a big decision like that. But I think sometimes, at least this is what happened for me, I got stuck in the mindset that this is just how it is.
When making a difficult decision, it's hard to push back on what society has deemed as quote unquote normal and what you want your life to look like. So just because the typical American may have a work life that looks like XYZ, that doesn't mean that you have to settle for that, because for some people it works. I've known people before who love corporate. They're like, I don't want to be in a small business. I want to be corporate. I want to have a ladder to climb. And I like that structured framework of a company. I don't like it at all. And so there's just different things that people want for their lives and want their lives, how they want their lives to look. And so when you're making difficult decisions, for instance, changing a job, that can be super difficult when you've had it laid out before you. This is what it's supposed to look like. And you're pushing back on that and saying, that's not what I want it to look like for me, though.
Right. And like you said, it comes back to what people think. And I think that's a really common thread through everything, but specifically with decisions. So transitioning from professional, think of a relationship. Say, you know, the relationship isn't healthy for you. You have tried to make it work and you just know ultimately deep down this isn't working. So many times I hear, but what will my kids think? What will my family think? What will my friends think? And so when there's a difficult decision involved, I think you have to tune out the static and really get in tune with yourself. And I am such a fan of pro-con lists. You make the pros and cons based on you and your decision and what works best for you, not what other people think.
Yeah, you've had me make those before.
I do. So know if you come to me and you have a difficult decision to make, I will have you do a pro-con list. Not based on what everyone else thinks, but based on what is best for you.
I remember one of the biggest difficult decisions I had to make in my lifetime is when I had to make the decision to quit my college hockey team. And it was somewhat similar to your experience in the workforce, where I loved my sport and I would do anything to be the best at my sport and I would train hard and all of that. But it just wasn't putting me in a good place mentally, emotionally. It just wasn't good for me. And so even though I wanted to keep training because I love the sport and I love to play, it was not in my best interest to continue doing so. And I had to make that choice, and I cried and I cried and I cried and I cried. You know, I had teammates who were disappointed in me, teammates who didn't want me to quit, teammates who said, you know, you're stronger than this. And it's not that I couldn't have been stronger. It's that that's not what I wanted my life to look like. That's not how I wanted to feel. I was consistently feeling, like you were saying, I was feeling like a shell of myself. I was crying way too much. No human should be crying 5 days a week, right? And so I would,
unless it's therapeutic, like a release, like maybe
a
week straight,
and
still
then probably like pointing to a good counselor 5 days a week. So that was a really difficult decision for me as well. When I was making the decision to quit the team, which the Q word sucks. It does not feel good to associate with, because we've always been taught, don't quit, don't quit, don't quit. But there are times when it's like, nope, that's actually the healthiest decision for me, mentally, emotionally, and sometimes even physically, is to give up on that dream and move forward with a healthier pathway for ourselves.
And that goes back to that societal push that it's ingrained in our minds. Like, you go as hard as you can, you don't give up, you don't quit. But when it starts to impact your health in any way for a long amount of time, I think there are times where it's okay to have healthy stress, and that shapes things. But at the same time, I think that if you're living and operating from that state, which for us in both of those situations we were, it wasn't appropriate for us to keep moving forward. So you said something interesting about the crying for a week that I want to touch on. One thing I've really, really had to learn for myself is that you should never make a decision when you're emotional. And that is way easier said than done. But I would challenge you. I would challenge you next time you have to make a decision to do a mental check and see where you're at, because there were definitely times I would be like, I'm not emotional. I just know this needs to happen, or like, this is where I'm at and this is what I want. And then if I probably would have given myself like a couple hours to calm down, in my wise mind, I would have been like, oh no, I definitely was emotional. And I actually took a course on emotional sensitivity, and one of the things they helped me differentiate was intuition versus an emotional based decision. Because as they were teaching some of these things, I was like, well, what about intuition? Because I do believe in that and I think it's important. And they said the number one indicator of an emotional decision versus intuition is urgency. So if you feel like, I have to do this right now, I need to send that text, I need to tell them how I feel, I need to tell them what's on my mind. If there's that urgency, there is a good chance you are in your emotional brain. You need to give yourself a timeout to fully regulate yourself again. And just having that pause point and that lens of, where am I? And do I need to make this decision right now? And it actually happened to me today. I had a text message in the morning and I was feeling a little charged about it. And emotional, I feel like emotional gets a bad rap. It doesn't mean crying all of the time. It means that you are feeling something very intensely. Emotion can be anger, frustration. You can just be really charged up. And so I had that situation this morning where I wanted to respond to a text message and I thought I was not being emotional. But then once I actually formulated what I wanted to say in my head and the tone I wanted to have and how I wanted to convey the message, I was like, no, you're a little amped up right now. You're a little sassy. You need to give yourself some time. So I gave myself, I think it was till the afternoon, and I reassessed the situation. So I always put it back on my docket. Like, I'm going to come back to this and see where I'm at. And wouldn't you know, my response in the afternoon was way different than it would have been in the morning. And not only is it preserving that relationship with that person, it's preserving my self-respect. And so when you're making difficult decisions, you should never be emotional. Don't recommend drinking. That's not good either.
That's never helped anyone.
You want to talk about bad decisions I made. Some of the conversations I chose to have with people when I had been drinking, not good. So really just knowing that anytime there's a difficult decision, you want to be in tune with yourself and you want to make sure that you're emotionally regulated.
So if someone is having a difficult time emotionally regulating and they understand, they've identified that, what are some ways that they can come back and emotionally regulate so that they can answer? Because sometimes we don't have the luxury of waiting a day or an afternoon or something like that. So what are some things that people can do in that moment to say, all right, I am completely emotionally charged right now. I'm dysregulated. I want to tell this person off, but I know that I need to come back to a logical space rather than emotional space. What can they do?
So the number one thing, and I would say this with children as well, is a cognitive shift. So if you have very minimal time to get your mindset right and you know you're in your emotional brain, watch YouTube videos of kittens or puppies or something that makes you laugh, something that makes you happy. So a cognitive shift is pulling you from one part of your brain to the other as quick as possible. So an example of that with a child would be if a child is starting to escalate and they're becoming emotionally dysregulated and you have to walk in the grocery store, you keep the coolest thing you can think of in your pocket and you go, oh my gosh, look at what I just found in my pocket. Because when someone's in that space, that's not the time to try to problem solve and work through it. You have to get them back and then you can have a conversation and say, I could tell you were really frustrated. So if you can excuse yourself to go to the bathroom while you're in a meeting or before you have that conversation and just give yourself a cognitive shift really quick, that's the best way to do it. And then for some other people, I know meditating is helpful, or listening to soothing sounds or deep breathing. And truthfully, I know everyone says meditate and do deep breathing, and I don't doubt that those aren't great solutions. But for me, when I'm pissed off, I can't do deep breathing. I sound like a dragon, and everyone can see that I'm trying to do
your nostrils flare too.
They do. And so that's not something that works for me. For me, it's a cognitive shift or a distraction that can pull me out of it. But for other people, it's different.
Well, I would say too that the deep breathing is actually not that's not just a distraction technique, that's actually science.
Right.
You can certainly do deep dragon breathing while watching kittens.
Yeah. I think someone should try that and let us know how it worked. Like when you're about to explode, do some dragon breathing and watch some kittens and let us know how long it takes to turn it around.
So when I'm thinking about decisions, so we've been talking about pretty heavy decisions, right? So job changes, quitting a sport, those are fairly large life decisions. But when we're talking about something that's just a little bit less life altering, but still a difficult decision, one thing that I always consider is I always try to think about what is the long-term outcome of this decision and what is the short-term outcome. So that is actually one of my behavioral tendencies that can irritate some of the other profiles, is that I like to think about all the steps. So shifting back to DISC real quick. She's rolling her eyes at me. Shifting
With
back,
love.
Shifting back
With
to
love.
the DISC profiles really quick. The D tendency is the visionary. So they have a really cool vision and they say, let's go, 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 go. And the C tendency, which is my highest tendency, is to say, okay, what about steps 1, 7, 9, and what about in the future?
Throw them all in the garbage.
But this is good though. This is how we make good long-term decisions and not just what feels good in the moment. So anyway, the long-term outcome of the decision and the short-term outcome of the decision. Also, I like to kind of take a step back from it and ask, would I be proud of this decision in a day from now, in a week from now? Would I be proud if someone who looks up to me saw me making this decision? Would I be proud if someone that I look up to saw me making this decision? Is this who I want to be?
Not only will this make so-and-so proud, but what best serves the situation long term. So whether that's for yourself, whether that's for your relationship. So in a relationship would be a really good example. Let's use the dishes. God, I love the dishes.
Do you?
Yeah, no, I hate them.
Yeah.
I get home, we eat dinner, and say I put my dish in the sink without rinsing it, and Bethian loses her mind because she has been compounded with things at work all day. So in the short term, it makes her feel really good to yell at me about the dishes, even though that's doing long-term damage to my self-esteem and our relationship. It gets her needs met.
It didn't even necessarily, if I were to lash out, it still didn't get the primary need met, which was I needed the dishes done, or I needed the dishes rinsed. So it felt good emotionally in that moment, but it still didn't solve the problem that I'm supposedly upset about.
But short term, it made you feel better because you got to get out your frustration. But look at what that does in the long term. It's not good for our relationship, and it doesn't get the dishes done. And so really, I agree with you in those moments saying, does this serve my short-term need or my long-term need? And sometimes that extends out beyond you at work, with your partner, with your kids. Yeah, screaming at them right now to pick up their stuff is going to make me feel better, but is it really teaching them that they need to pick up their stuff? And so that's a really good, another pause tool. The more space and time you can give in both of those situations, the better.
Yeah, and another thing that they talked about at OCL, I remember the visual that they gave, that you can't make a logical decision when your brain is filled with emotion. And so finding a way to have an outlet for that emotion to let the balance come back to your brain between emotion and logic, because we've talked about this before. You can't work from both sides of your brain at the same time. So you're either working from the emotional side or the logical side.
Absolutely. And I think with difficult decisions, so even scaling it back just a little bit more. So we've talked about big life-changing decisions. We've talked about in-the-moment decisions where you still have to make a difficult decision. But what about just little things like, do I want to ride a scooter down to get the mail, or do I want to walk down the driveway to get the mail?
Have you had this consideration?
Oh, if we had a scooter, things might be different.
We have a gravel driveway.
What are you saying?
How well would a scooter work on a gravel driveway?
I mean, they're pretty advanced now. A wagon, anything would suffice.
You've considered getting our mail in a wagon?
I mean, I think it'd be pretty fun. Okay, I'll use a different example. Water and coffee. I can make a decision to start drinking coffee as soon as I wake up because I'm tired and it makes me feel better and it boosts me quickly. Is that really what's best for my body? Probably not. I should probably drink some water when I first wake up. And I know ultimately that's what I should do for myself, but I have a decision. And to me, that's a difficult one because if I can be caffeinated and get moving right away, or if I slow down again and think about short term and long term, and they're both the things we talked about. It's an emotional decision because I want to feel better and be awake as soon as possible. And it's also short term versus long term. Short term, hell yeah, give me the coffee in my veins and let's get going. But long term, it's better for me to hydrate before I drink caffeine. I think it's really important to check in with yourself. Just because they're not altering your life doesn't mean they're not important because you always have a choice.
Yeah, for sure.
And for me, I, again, started doing a lot of work we both did around the values. And so I'm telling you, if you do that values bracket and you narrow down your top 2 values and then you intentionally make decisions based on those.
You've been doing great with that lately.
Yes. My last top 2 were growth and courage. And so growth is a no-brainer for me, but courage being the second one, it's literally changed how I interact and how I make decisions. And for like 4 weeks, I would come home and say, this was the decision I had to make.
Courageous move
and
I
this
made
is
today.
how I use courage. So for me, I use my values to drive my decisions, all going back to that integrity and self-respect and being authentic to myself. So it doesn't have to be a monumental decision. Like there are lots of little decisions that we can make every single day.
Well, yeah, and your little decisions add up to a big difference. And one way that I think you can also make decisions is, am I going to have a victim mentality and the day is happening to me? Or am I going to conquer the day purposely and intentionally and look at my values and live into my values and lean into my values every single day?
Absolutely. And let's be real. We all have those days, no matter how great we're trying to be, and we are going to live intentionally and make a decision and not be a victim. We all have those days / moments where it happens, where we've just had a crappy day and we're not feeling it. And it's really easy to start whining and complaining. But again, right in that moment, you have a choice. And it doesn't mean it has to be beautiful and perfect and robot of, I'm not being a positive person. It's like, no, I'm feeling really crappy right now, and that's okay. And I'm going to have self-compassion and say it's okay to feel crappy. But then I'm going to decide, do I want my whole day to look like this? Or how can I move out of this? Like that is a decision to make, but you don't have to dismiss it, I guess. Like it's okay to own it and to say, yeah, I'm having a super crappy day, but now I'm going to decide I don't want the rest of my crappy day to become that.
We've talked about this before, how incredible the mind's power has over the body itself.
Oh yeah.
Right. And so our thoughts turn into our behaviors and our behaviors become our character. And so that thread of what we think and what we say to ourselves every single day and the choices we make, they all roll up to be our behavior and our tendencies.
Oh, for sure. And I think just going back to the more time and space you can put between something, I think that's applicable for decisions. And like you said earlier, there will be situations where you can't, but I am now thinking of food choices. Like today, I don't know what was going on, but I wanted a bagel with cream cheese and I wanted decaf coffee. Like,
oh, I made some bad choices today.
Oh, you did.
Oh,
you
I
did.
really
so
did.
You had some decisions today. But it's that moment of like, had that food not been sitting in front of you. So
I ate cookies and cheesecake. Okay. I'm just going to say that.
Oh, I was going to rat you out. So
yeah, no, it was like 4 bites of cheesecake and my stomach has been upset since then.
But think about this. Had the cookies not been in your car, or had they not had dessert on the table, and instead they asked you, would you like dessert? Maybe you would have still said yes.
I would have said no.
But
I 100% know that I would have said no.
Well, there you go. So just that little bit of space in between allowed you to make a decision that was best suited for you. And
I did not have that space, and so I made a very
it was right on the table.
Really bad decision.
And so for me, let's go the other way. I would have given anything to eat a bagel with cream cheese. And I went down the road to grab some food, and the guy in front of me freaking had a thing of bagels. I was like, of all things, sir, why do you have this right now? But I still made the choice to buy things that were good for me that didn't have allergens. And so I went the other way with it. If the bagel had been sitting in front of me, I would have eaten it. But because I
if
had
the
time,
man said, I was buying this for you, would you like a bagel?
well, I think I was already past it at that point. Like I had already mind over matter, right? Power of the mind. I had already said that's not an option. Short term versus long term. Short term, that would be damn good in my belly. Long term, I'd be breaking out in hives and not able to breathe and all of these things. So
That's actually really true. She's got really intense
yeah, that's like a whole different story for a different time.
I just feel not stellar. You actually have
really
very
severe
reactions.
reactions.
So now we would love to hear what you have to say on the topic. How do you make difficult decisions? When is a time that you made a difficult decision, but it turned out to be in the best interest of your life or your family? Head on over to lifewithbethandcord.com/podcast, and you can find the show notes there and give us a comment there, or you can find us on Instagram or Facebook at Life with Beth and Court. We would love to interact with you guys. It's our favorite part of the day. So thanks for spending another episode here with us. And until next week, keep building your best life.
Bye, guys.
What is our mic test song today?
Well, it's by Bastille, and I think he's British or English. I'm not sure what the right terminology is there. Do you?
I mean, I think Great Britain is part of England.
But do you say they're English or do you say they're British? I'm English. Maybe I'm not. Maybe I just speak English.
Oh my gosh. This conversation is going downhill at a rapid pace.
You said that maybe this is where it ends. Take a bow for the bad decisions that we made. Bad decisions that we made. I made some bad decisions, so I can relate to that song.
Oh, I get it. Is it because our topic today is about decision making?
Yes.
Oh my gosh. You're so
You thought I was just
funny.
randomly singing a song that had nothing to do with it?
Well, would that shock me? No.
When it comes to music, I know what I'm doing, and you know me better than that.
No, it's not that you don't know what you're doing, but nothing's ever random in your head. So when you bust out in Whitney Houston, it may be random to me, but it certainly isn't random to you.
Very true.
Thank you. True.
Also, I think we should share with everyone where we're sitting to record right now.
I like to be in our studio where there are sound panels on the wall and where it is beautifully curated.
Curated.
Yeah. Ooh. It's beautifully curated to do podcasts.
So where are we, though?
We're on the couch.
So who won that argument?
I wouldn't say you won. I would say that I conceded to, I don't know if that means you won still. You didn't win. I'm just agreeing to compromise. That's what's happening right now.
I am in my natural habitat. I am surrounded by windows. I can see all of the fall leaves. It's raining out. The lighting is low. I'm sitting here relaxing with my feet out, and that is all.
And that concludes what I had to say.
Oh, and I don't like the stand for the microphone. This makes me feel like I'm about to rock out and just give
Which I don't understand why, because artists go to recording studios all the time where they've got the mic held out in front of them for them.
No, if I were an artist, this is how I would.
You'd sit on the couch and you'd record like this?
I would. You know I would.
Okay.
I'd bring the recording studio here.
Okay.
And be like, let's make this work.
And they may be like, make your own self work. we're unsigning you on account of being difficult.
Well, difficult is a good segue to...
Is it?
Decisions.
Is it? Okay. Difficult decisions? Is that where you're going?
Ooh, yes. Let's
How to make difficult decisions.
That. Yeah.
Okay.
Tell us about that, Beth Ann. Oh, am I still talking?
Well, yeah, you didn't stop talking.
Oh, okay. I know where I want to go with this. Okay. Back on track. Ready? Look alive.